Hello, we are Team 9, and the paper we are going to deal with is look at the first sentence, position bias in question answering. The main topic of problem is positional bias of extractive question answering. Let's call extractive question answering as QA for short. Many QA models extract answer from given context by predicting start and end positions of answers because it makes the test much faster and easier. However, when position of answer is highly skewed in learning data, it can lead to the positional bias. As you can see the example on the right, if the answer is usually on the case sentence on learning data, the model will choose the answer on that sentence even if it is not on that sentence. So our goal is to debias the model. Before dealing about the approach of given paper, we must first deal with ensemble-based debias technique, which is the main idea of the paper. The main idea of this technique is to debias the base model by ensembling it with predefined bias model. It assumes that training a model by ensembling it with bias model will prevent it from following the strategy of biased model. Let's observe an example from original paper. Bias-only model is well-trained model on learning data, but may work very poorly on out-of-domain inputs. As you can see the example, even if the grass in the picture is brown, the bias-only model answers it as green because learning data usually notice that grass is green. Then we will use additional model called robust model that avoids using methods used by bias-only model. We get prediction by ensembling these two models, calculate the gradient, and train only the robust model. As we can observe in the example, ensembling these two models divides the robust model and it successfully comes out with the result, grass is brown. Let's jump into the actual approach of used in the paper. As we previously mentioned, we first need bias model for ensembling, and the paper presents answer prior, which simply gives the higher score for positions that contain answers in training data. There are two of them, first word level and second sentence level. Difference between two of them is that they focus on position of answers as word or sentence. And next is ensemble method. As we discussed earlier, we have robust model and bias model and have to ensemble them. The paper suggests two ways, bias product and learned mixing. Bias product simply adds two log probability of models, and learned mixing applies weight to answer prior so that it can adjust weight itself. Using these strategies, the paper tried to devise the QA models that have been trained on position-skewed dataset. Next, I will introduce the dataset used by the paper. In the paper, the researchers used original SQUAD dataset, which is quite well-known dataset for question answering task. And the researchers subsampled the SQUAD datasets whose answers lie in the case sentence. Especially, they focus on the subsampled dataset that their answer is lied on the first sentence because it has the largest proportion of the entire dataset, which is 32%. By the way, notice that there are more than 32% of questions that their answer is placed on the first sentence. It means that the dataset that we commonly use to deal with question answering is also highly skewed, and debiasing QA models could be a very important job.
Next, I will introduce the overall replication result. First, we reproduce the result of the paper based on the official implementation on GitHub. Then, we train the model with various settings. The paper provides various experiment settings such as randomized position of dataset, maximize entropy regularization as baseline, and bias product. Learned mixing probability is ready for proposal method. After all of the experiment, we can summarize the result as table and visualize intermediate states of the model with some graph. We faced a lot of problems during the experiment, and they are listed as follows. First, we had a hard time to setting the environments for experiment, such as library dependency conflict and Hugging Face API issues. Secondly, in order to extract intermediate states of the model and visualize them, and we try to reproduce the experiments in the paper with different settings, which were also needed to write some code. Lastly, there are lots of experiments in the paper, and we had a limited resource to make all of them rightly. For example, power outage and disk space shortage is occurred during the training makes the project hard. We solved the problem that I mentioned previously by following. First, we download the library manually to resolve the conflict, and we found a way to download the model by using Google Colab and Git NFS API. Next, in order to modify code, we had to look at the code thoroughly and modify them step by step to get the intermediate state of the model and visualization. Third, we had to train the model with various experiment settings daily. Moreover, we used additional training environment for experiments such as Google Colab and Best AI. Lastly, we kept asking a question when we had faced a problem. Thank you for all of the helping. The experiment setting is following. We used training dataset with squad, which the answer is lied on the certain position of sentence. And we use answer prior distribution of the training dataset. And we use validation dataset of squad for evaluation. We use BERT model, and we use cosine similarity as qualitative metric and exact matching ratio and effort score as the quantitative metric. We could reproduce the result of this model successfully. First, we check the existence of position bias of QA model by comparing the cosine similarity between hidden states and word embedding. As you can see, the model without the biasing method is biased to the position information when we only use the dataset that has answer in the first sentence. Secondly, we also checked that the position bias is alleviated with the paper's proposed method. Specifically, learned mixing method works well for alleviating position bias in hidden representation. As you can see, the hidden representation contains information of word embedding uniformly in the learned mixing method rather than non-biased method and the bias product model. The more precise result is following. The models are trained with the dataset of the first sentence answer, and the model should determine the answer both of the first answer case and rest of the case. As you can see, the learned mixing method reduces position bias significantly rather than any other baseline. To make it more generally, we made experiment to various training datasets that has different position of answer. We can notice that the performance gap between bias test dataset and the rest of the dataset is not that much with learned mixing method. Therefore, all of the experiment shows that the method that the paper proposed is good for reducing position bias.
Now I will talk about our plans to modify the original paper. Our first approach is applying Korean dataset. We will use Core Code 1 dataset. The first thing we need to do is pre-processing the dataset. In the figure below, we can see the format that authors of the original paper used for their experiments. They divided squad dataset into parts by position of answer. We will pre-process Core Code dataset with same structure. Using Core Code dataset is reasonable since it has same structure with squad dataset. After pre-processing Core Code dataset, we will try different Korean BERT-based model from Hugging Face that works best with proposed method of the original paper. For each of the models, we will conduct experiment on baseline, word-level debiasing methods, and sentence-level debiasing methods. After that, we will try applying debiasing methods to multi-paragraph dataset. In this task, we chose Core Code 2.0 as target dataset. In this dataset, we need to find answer from full Wikipedia article. We think that data preprocessing will be more challenging since Core Code 2.0 contains HTML tags and some answers come from tables. We will try to delete those data and get only text-based question-answer sets. If we manage to pre-process the dataset successfully, we will apply debiasing methods and analyze the results. Or else, we will try finding another dataset. Our two plans will not be conducted concurrently. Multi-paragraph approach will go on top of Korean dataset approach. Since there are lots of baselines that we need to run, it may be hard for us to finish our plans due to limited GPU usages. But we will try our best to finish our plans. Table below is our week-by-week plan.